What is it?
Don't you play any of that heavy metal music tonight, Mr. Sovryn. I don't know what happened to you, but you used to be such a good conservative boy.
Whatever you say, missus, you should mind your own goddamn business.
What did you call me, young man?
Oh, nothing. Good night. Tell me what to listen to. Try this.
Come on!
Bringing his hard-hitting attitude and journalism to hard rock and heavy metal. Get ready to get rocked. Hard. And fast. By the podcast champion, the man of tomorrow, Dragonaut One Brian Sovryn, on the Hard and Fast podcast. And now, here's Brian.
The man of tomorrow, Dragonaut One, the podcast champion, tap the belt, woo, is here for you for the third part in the You Need Metal trilogy, which actually has a fourth part, which is going to end up getting released as well. Both the third and fourth part, unlike part 1 and 2, are from 2018. Part 1 and 2 were actually from 2014, so the Dragonauts of the Hard and Fast podcast got to go on a little time traveling, as it were. And this one gets into, as to where the other two were covering bands that were still kicking ass into 2014. This one, which I ended up recording 4 years later, this one actually will cover like newer bands. Some bands that had still been around perhaps for like a decade. For example, there's a couple bands on here. Eclipse, might not have heard of them. Fozzy, maybe you've heard of them because, of course, they have a connection with the fact that their lead singer is Chris Jericho, the very famous and deservedly so wrestler. In fact, actually, speaking of wrestling, this is so great. I have a Hollywood Hulk Hogan shirt on. Can you believe that? It says Hollywood Rules right on the front of it, and then on the back it says The Darker Side of Hollywood. So cool to have like an NWO Hogan shirt. And it's new. It's a new shirt, actually, from WWE. But anyway, you might have heard of Fozzy because, again, you know, they're fairly famous, but a lot of people didn't even really hear about them until their latest album that came out last year, which is Judas. Or maybe they heard their previous album. Was it Do You Want to Start a War? I think was their previous album. Badass. I think all their albums are great. Like I've been enjoying Fozzy. Well, their first self-titled album was like covers, but I've been enjoying them since Happenstance, which seems like forever ago, frankly. But anyway, a lot of these bands have been around for a good long while, but you know, maybe only their most recent albums have become hits, or because of the internet and streaming services, finally you're no longer, you know, you're basically, as say if you're an American Dragonaut of the Hard and Fast podcast, you're not under embargo anymore, right? Where you had to pay what seemed to be almost a tariff. You know, you had to pay $30, $40 to get a CD from a band that was like a big deal over in Europe, or something like that. And there's some bands on here that, are more established. But anyway, you got to listen to it to hear it. This one does, unlike part 1 and 2, it does not have a custom intro. Because this was originally patron content, but it was recently released. It didn't go through a re-release like parts 1 and 2 did. I'm not here to confuse you. Okay. I'm really, really not. But this is something where these are bands that, like, very lesser known that you might, or lesser known in comparisons to the bands that were in part 1 and 2 that you might not have heard of, that I think are incredibly important. Okay. Including, Halestorm's on there. I think Halestorm might be the most important band out there right now, as far as, that aren't actually from the 80s, right? Or from the 70s or 80s. So, anyway, I break all of that down. I go into all of them, and it lasts a good hour. As to where, like, the past couple releases were almost a couple hours a shot. This one's only about an hour. But because of that, I want to give you a little bit of a custom intro. I want to talk about something. And actually, I'm going to break into a story that already got sent to me. I'm already getting emails from listeners of the Hard and Fast podcast. I'm so honored by that, especially for a show that's really very new. I'm not new to podcasting at all, obviously. I've been podcasting for almost a decade now, but to have a newer show that's already got people on board, dynamite. I love you. So anyway, the email that came in was here. I'll read a little bit of it. I came across this article on Motherboard that I thought could be a fun topic for the Hard and Fast podcast. Keep rocking it like only you know how. Woo! And thank you, emailer, for the email. And the story is an interesting one that I had crossed my bow, because I do keep an eye on the hard rock and heavy metal scene. And this is pretty interesting. Here's the headline for this story, and there will be a link in the show notes for you to check out all of this, because some of it you need to actually check out on YouTube. But anyway, it's from Motherboard, this from April 19th, 2019, very fresh here. This YouTube channel streams AI-generated death metal 24/7. And they're not kidding. That's exactly what it does. It's running live all the time. We got to be careful with the term AI. And we'll talk about that in a second, because I know some listeners of the Hard and Fast podcast, I'm used to doing a tech show. So, I expect a certain level of technical knowledge. But this article does a pretty good job of breaking this down a bit. But I do want to, if you're new to concepts like AI, aren't exactly your interest du jour, I want to explain a little bit, because I think there's a lot of confusion, especially when you're everyday journalists, like, say, Motherboard. No offense to them, but when they use the term AI, it's often like clickbait, because everybody hears AI and they think Skynet, when no. But anyway, it'd be pretty amazing, like, if Skynet were, sending out Terminators to some death metal, but whatever. So let's read here. DataBots was developed, which that's the name of the data, as DADA. Okay, Data. DataBots was developed by two music technologists who wanted to prove that a neural network was capable of capturing the subtle stylistic differences between death metal, math rock, and other lesser-known genres. I want to comment on that little sub byline there. I don't think that death metal is like a lesser known genre. I mean, maybe they're not categorizing that as the lesser known genre. I feel like today, and I'm going to talk more about this as we read the story. I feel like today, when people think metal, that's all they think is death metal. Like they just instantly think screamo, like all that crap. I might have just let a cat out of the bag there. But anyway, at least it's not a dead cat. Or can we ask Schrodinger? No. All right. Anyway, let me read the story here from Motherboard. For nearly a month, DataBots has been streaming, or maybe it's DataBots, I don't know. DataBots has been streaming death metal nonstop on its YouTube channel. While that may sound, again, that link will be in the show notes as well to the story and the YouTube channel. While that may sound like a huge undertaking for a typical 4-piece metal band, DataBots is actually an AI generating its own approximations of what death metal sounds like. DataBots, a fake band powered by deep learning software, was developed by C.J. Carr and Zach Zukowski, two musicians and technologists who met while they were going to Berklee College of Music in Boston. They told the outline. It's based on a recurrent neural network computing architecture that quote-unquote learns patterns in a large amount of input data, in this case death metal, in order to predict what musical elements and sequences are most common and recreates them. They broke down their process in a 2017 paper posted to the ArgSiv preprint server. They start by feeding the AI model short segments of music a few seconds at a time. As this training goes on, the AI learns the identifying features and starts to produce more and more detailed samples, including riffs and sectional transitions. In the paper, Carr and Zukowski wrote that initially they were surprised by the result. Quote, "While we set out to achieve a realistic recreation of the original data, we were delighted by the aesthetic merit of its imperfections." Solo vocalists become a lush choir of ghostly voices, rock bands become crunchy cubist jazz, and crossbreeds of multiple recordings become a surrealist chimera of sound, end quote. While it doesn't sound totally human because the vocals in each track are distorted gibberish, notes are held without room for breaths, and some of the guitar riffs are at speeds most people couldn't achieve. The general feel and instrumentals are convincing, especially to the untrained ear. With DataBots, besides the YouTube stream, they have released 10 different albums based on the music of metal and experimental groups like H.E.A.T, Battles, and Meshuggah. Meshuggah, of course, being a very famous death metal band. Anyway, they then create, and actually I'm a bit of a fan of Meshuggah. They then curate the best sounding tracks into an album. They characterize their work with Databots as working towards, quote, eliminating humans from black metal, end quote. For each project, they have Databots analyze, quote, subsets of a single artist's discography, end quote, and work off of it to create its own work. The music that the live stream is based on is a Vancouver-based technical death metal band called Archspire, and it produced another pleasant surprise. Quote, most nets we trained, meaning neural nets, made shitty music soup. The songs would destabilize and fall apart. This one was special, though. CJ Carr told Motherboard. The Archspire Databots created much more consistent, stable music. Carr's guess is that because Archspire's music is played at such a high tempo, it stabilizes what the bot puts out. Quote, it's autonomous, running on a Linux server somewhere in South Carolina, he said. You're hearing everything it makes. In the future, Carr and Zakowski hope to include some kind of audience interaction with Databots. If you need a nice jolt, the live stream keeps going 24/7. Okay. So let's talk about this. I've listened to this. Now, all right, I guess we need to open up with 2 or 3 points here. One is, again, this is not Skynet, okay? When you use the term AI can include a lot of different ideas. Neural networks, which is what this is. Deep learning, machine learning. Then there's what's called AGI, which would be a Skynet type thing, which doesn't exist. Okay, I mean, there's attempts at making it a thing, IBM's Watson and so on, of making a artificial intelligence that could somehow match the human mind. But understand this, in AGI, which stands for Artificial General Intelligence, your kind of your Skynet scenario, be it, benevolent or malevolent, doesn't exist. And in my opinion, as a technologist and tech journalist, is never going to exist. I'm not the only person that says that, but that's my opinion. I have a very old saying about artificial intelligence, and that is, artificial intelligence is no match for natural stupidity. Okay, and I mean, we could have a huge conversation, one that I've had many times on Sovereign Tech. Whenever something happens like, an AI beat a human at Go, the game Go and all this. And anyway, I'll spend 20 minutes just trying to debunk, relax, this shit's not happening. Anyway, so we got that out of the way. Now, the other point to bring up with this, again, the first point is that this is not Skynet. Okay, they're using the term AI, but it really doesn't mean much of anything. It's not really creating something original. You're just feeding something in, and whatever's coming out is coming out. In fact, they even admitted that some of what they put in just turned into music soup, where it didn't make any sense and it just went off the rails. Okay, except for certain bands that they would end up using where it would work. The other point I want to bring up here, let's go to this one. The other point I want to bring up here is that now I am an absolute fan of metal and hard rock. Absolutely. Okay, obviously I'm doing a podcast about it. A podcast that I plan on doing for as long as I'm alive. I am not the biggest fan of death metal. Okay, I am not the biggest fan of where, I like melody, I like harmony, I like where a singer really sings. I am not the biggest fan of the, and all that stuff. Not to say that I don't mind some good guttural stuff. I mean, I'm a huge fan of Overkill. Bobby just kills it on that. But a lot of this, I mean, I get it. I understand the talent. Whitechapel, Children of Bodom, Cannibal Corpse, and all. I mean, I know them. Suicide Silence. I like Suicide Silence, we know what happened there. But whatever, I dig it. I'm just saying that it's not my favorite type of metal at all. And I could almost argue that I don't even necessarily, I just don't like it. Some of it transcends itself and becomes something just so incredible that I can get into it. But in general, that's really not my scene. I respect it, but I'm going to say this to you. I think the fact that a neural network can mimic this music and spew it out 24/7 and it somehow makes some degree of musical sense kind of goes to show part of why I don't like death metal is because it feels like anybody could do it. I mean, that's not true. I know. I mean, now I was half expecting a lot of it to come out sounding like Fear Factory, right? Because if I've ever heard metal that sounds like a machine is doing it, or a machine was making it, I would say it's Fear Factory. I mean, their fucking drummer, that guy has to be, I'm still not sure that he's not a machine, but I mean, I know he's real. You get my point. Yeah, I mean, I get it. I understand the talent that it kind of takes, but also I understand that some types of music, for example, historically, like disco is fucking easy. And yes, it is. Now, great disco, doing the Bee Gees or something like that, that's hard. That takes a lot of talent. But a lot of it, just like pop music as well, within certain genres, some genres are just, you couldn't put it into an AI and have something come out that makes sense, or just any run-of-the-mill idiot can't just make it. It seemed like anybody could make disco at the time. That's partly why disco burned out, because there's just so much of it coming out, and it's sort of so easy to do. Pop music's running into the same thing in a very real way. I mean, I don't want to get into an argument about there are only so many musical notes in the world, and eventually you're going to run out of those mathematically. I'm not even going to go into that. Everything's a remix too, okay? Not going to go into that concept either. But we could go those directions. But my point is that I think death metal, because you don't have to have somebody actually singing something. I mean, I don't know how many death metal bands I've heard where I don't think there's words. They tell me there's words. I could maybe look at the CD, if they even have a CD available, and supposedly there's lyrics there, but I swear to Satan that they're just going, I mean, like there are no words there. I don't believe you that you're actually singing something. And I've gone to these concerts and I'm just baffled. I'm absolutely baffled. But because of that, it's not surprising to me that an AI can make death metal that actually sounds pretty good, because after a fashion, anybody can make this stuff. You don't have to have so much talent. I mean, you gotta roll the guitar's got to do something. I'm not saying you don't have to know how to play. Drummers got to be able to do something. I mean, a ton of albums today use a drum machine anyway. I'm not insulting anybody for doing that sort of thing. The democratization of technology to allow, I mean, even me as a podcaster, the barrier to entry to become a podcaster and basically be on the radio. In fact, a lot of my shows are, it's mind blowing. I mean, you could run a podcast from your fucking smartphone. Every aspect of it you could do from your smartphone if you really wanted to. I mean, parts of that are amazing. But again, I feel like this just goes to show, like, the death metal does not require a whole shit ton of talent, because if a neural network can do it, and that's so far down. I mean, it's not even really AI. I mean, it is. It falls under the banner term of AI, but not exact. Oh, fucking A. Now, the third point I want to bring up to you, and this is where things might get a little troublesome. Now, I grant you, I am someone who doesn't think that AI is ever going to get to the level of AGI, where it is a program, a computer that can basically think like a human. Okay, just to put it in simple terms. But someone is kind of worried. A lot of people are very worried about that. You can think of Elon Musk and a whole bunch of other people who are very concerned about what AI could do. I'll tell you, so one of my favorite metal bands, or whatever you want to label them under, prog rock, if you want to do that, that's fine. But Dream Theater. Now, Dream Theater, they came out with an album a couple years ago called The Astonishing. 2-disc, massive, huge, crazy production of a concept album. Okay, and it was this whole story. The story of The Astonishing is it's in the future, and basically AI is doing this exact thing where it's making all the music. And because the AI is making the music, and this is a story that John Petrucci, came up with, there's actually a novel which is really solid. I'm going to do a full review of it in a future episode of the Hard and Fast podcast. They did a novelization for it. There's even a video game. I mean, they really went all out with The Astonishing. I love the album. I think the album is, I mean, that's a lot of music, to just have a great time with. But anyway, John Petrucci's story for this was that, humanity's kind of falling apart mentally because it's not creating anymore. All the AI is doing all of it, right? Anyway, there's a bunch of names for all that within it. But it's interesting that, Dream Theater kind of called this a couple of years ago that this sort of thing would be happening. I mean, I think a lot of people that, when they critically look at pop music, they basically think that pumps out of an AI anyway, and in a lot of ways it might as well. But yeah, I mean, I was fascinated by that. And the instant I read this story, I instantly thought of The Astonishing from Dream Theater, where I was like, well, that's exactly what they said was going to happen, is that the AI was going to start making all of the music, and, humans were going to be cut out of it. And, and the music basically sucked, or it removed something special from the human condition and everything. So fortunately, like I said, I don't think that AGI is ever going to be a thing where it could create a scenario like The Astonishing. I appreciate what John Petrucci is putting out there. I think it's a beautiful story that he told with The Astonishing, both the album and the novelization that was done for it. Again, I'll review that in the future. But yeah, I mean, you listen to this. I mean, it's interesting. I don't know. You tell me. You can email me, bbs@sovereigntech.com. I mean, are you like rocking out to this? Are you putting on Databots and just like, holy shit, this is amazing? You know, are you buying their albums? I guess there's like 10 albums out there according to this. I've not bought them. I will not buy them. So, you know, I'll buy humans that make fucking music, you know, and it's not necessarily to insult the machines. And I really don't mean to insult death metal with this. Not really. I mean, there's aspects of death metal that I'm insulting. Sure. There's bands within death metal that I'm happy to insult, but I'm not speaking broadly about death metal that anybody can make that, because I know that's not true. All right. So anyway, it was an interesting story. Link is in the show notes if you want to end up checking that out. Now, I want to wrap this up, or wrap up this new opening, and we'll get into You Need Metal Part 3. And I assure you, this is all humans, baby, and all new, bands that are newer. Not all of them, I think, are freshly from the aughts. Some might be the later 90s. Some might even be from the 80s. But anyway, there's a lot to listen to here, and a lot to get into. And there's more than just like the big 8 that I list off, because generally I like to do a top 8. That's a tradition I've had for years now in podcasting. And because, you know, you might as well pick any number. There's no reason for it to be 5 or 10 or 3. So I go with 8. And you can check it out. And so if you are looking to hear some real kick-ass metal, well, here's You Need Metal Part 3 is another great place to start, or another place to grow in your appreciation of hard rock and heavy metal. So I'll leave it. I'll let the music ride this one out. You will hear, this one won't have as many references to Sovereign Tech because it's relatively new and was originally patron-only content. So you're getting this now for free, what was originally behind a paywall. So that's it for me. Dragonaut One signing off, and well, you're going to hear a lot more of me for the next hour, but there you go. Enjoy. Hey, when you're going to your next rock show and need a hotel, don't forget to use booking.hardandfastpodcast.com. Booking.com gets you the best prices all around the world, no matter where your next rock show is, and is loaded with reviews so that you get the best rates and the best hotel rooms, because, you never know who or how many people might be going back to your hotel room later that night, baby. And if you use the URL booking.hardandfastpodcast.com, you'll get a $25 cash reward. Can you beat that? Again, use booking.hardandfastpodcast.com to get $25 and the hottest rooms at the hottest prices. Booking.hardandfastpodcast.com. And don't forget to put up the Do Not Disturb sign, baby. All right, let's get back to the show. Woo! Woohoo! The Golden Stallion, the master of the triple black arts, here for another little Patreon episode, and this one is little, and it's one that you knew was coming, one that I had talked about. I said that I would do last week. Of course, I'm recording this in February of 2018, but last week I had released 2 Sovereign Rewinds, okay? And those 2 Sovereign Rewinds were for a series that I did that were Sovereign Top 8s called You Need Metal. Now, the first one I did back in 2014 was wildly popular. People were like, whoa, this is fucking awesome. Then I did You Need Metal 2, and people enjoyed that as well. And I never got around to doing a You Need Metal 3, and it's probably just as well, because that was also in 2014. It's about 4 years later. And obviously, I have learned of many other bands in that time frame that I find to be, that are modern, that, maybe have just started out over the past few years, because a lot of the bands within You Need Metal 1 and You Need Metal 2 were, classic acts that just people forgot were still making music, or maybe they just completely forgot about, sadly, altogether. So I thought, I was like, all right, you know what? I tease this in the opening for You Need Metal 2. I said, for Patreon, I'll do a You Need Metal 3. So this is purely a bonus episode. Now, I want to get a couple things out of the way before we get into our actual. So this is a Sovereign Top 8. There's going to be 8 bands that we'll cover. I'll probably mention a few others, but there will be eight bands that we'll cover, and they won't really be in any particular order. Okay. That said, a couple things I want to get out of the way. One, if you don't like the Sovryn Rewinds, or you don't like this type of content, okay, that is totally valid and fine. Good for you. Most of you, and I'm not complaining, I'm just saying most of you, you pay $1 a month, and I put out near daily content. Okay? I say this all the time. I'm just going to say it again. Some of my patrons love certain content. Some of my patrons like other types of content. Some of my patrons like all of the content. Okay? You don't have to listen to everything. I am not putting a gun to your head to say you have to listen to every Patreon episode that comes out. Okay? Just making that clear for you. Some of the patrons are like, well, I don't like when you do this content. Okay, just that I appreciate you telling me, because that is important feedback for me, and I value it highly, just as I value you highly as a patron. Okay? But then just this isn't for you, and listen to the next episode that comes out, because the following day you're probably going to get something else. Or if it's Friday, maybe you get a Sex and Science Hour, or you get the big Sovereign Tech Prime episode, or whatever. You don't have to listen to everything. I don't expect everybody to listen to everything. Even the most diehard fans of my show, just not even patrons of Sovereign Tech, I don't expect them to listen to every episode of Sovereign Tech. Hell, I don't expect anybody on planet Earth to listen to Sovereign Tech. I'm amazed how many people do. Like, I'm literally, jaw-dropping, eyes wide, amazed at how many people listen to Sovereign Tech and give a shit about what I have to say. So if this isn't your type of stuff, don't worry. You get plenty of other types of content. You get tech, you get anarchism, philosophy, you get science, you get history, you get the Q&As, you get the live Q&As, you get Star Wars updates, you get Star Trek updates. There's a wide variety of content that happens. And if you want, just real quick, if you want other types of content, all you got to do is tell me. You are the patrons. You are paying for a lot of this. You can control what you want it to be about. Okay. During the Q&As, right now, the question, the vault of questions is kind of low for Patreon Q&As. Okay. So if you want me to talk about a certain something, a great thing to do is to ask me on Patreon, and we'll cover it. I'll spend, if it's a great question, I have no problem spending an entire Q&A on just one question. Okay, so if you're looking for other types of content, you want me to talk about a certain something, as long as it's not some bullshit ICO, I'll probably talk about it, and just let me know. Okay, so I just want to, I'm not mad, so I think some of you were, but I'm not mad, but I'm just letting you know, hey, okay, this is, the point of Patreon. My audience is as varied as the show topics can be. And so I try to provide all different styles of what I can, and I like to bring closure to things. And that's kind of the main reason that I'm doing this, is that I like the idea of, having a trilogy. If I do part 1 and part 2, well, I'd like to do a part 3. I can't imagine that I'll ever really do a part 4 or 5. Unless there's some real some crazy renaissance in the metal industry. I mean, I like all different types of metal. I'm not just into more of the closer to hard rock, or what some people call hair metal, which is a term that I hate. But definitely that's a lot of what I listen to, but that's not all of it. I like all other types of metal, but I don't listen. I'll admit, okay, and I'm not the only person like this. The greatest metal and rock DJ in the world ever, that being Eddie Trunk. And look, folks, it's a fact. I mean, this is just look at his resume. I mean, it's enough to let you know. He'll say the same thing that I'm about to tell you. I can dig the screaming shit too, the really angry stuff. I can listen to Suicide Silence and, Cannibal Corpse and a bunch of those other guys, right? But I like some melody in my singing, man. That's just me. That's just me. And that's what I really dig. I can get behind the screaming stuff here and there, but by and large, I want more of that melodic singing. I want words in what I have going on. Unless I'm looking for music that doesn't have words to it, that's a very very different story as far as that goes. So, in fact, the other point I want to bring up, I was about to say something pretty anathema for any metalhead to pretty much say. So maybe I'll save it for the end of this episode, if I even get to it then. And if I don't, then I'll talk about it in another episode, because I had a little bit of a music epiphany
earlier today. And as of this recording, this is being recorded on February 12th, 2018. So I had a little bit of an epiphany, but maybe I'll save that for after, because why ruin the attitude of the metal, and all that. Put your horns up, baby. As I talked about in You Need Metal 1 and You Need Metal 2, I mean, I think regardless of any other opinion, I mean, I listen to a lot of other types of music. I really do, except for country, minus a few songs, like Modern Day Bonnie and Clyde by Travis Tritt. I love that song. She Thinks My Tractor's Sexy by, was that Kenny Chesney? I love that song. I can get behind, like Hank Williams III, even though that's barely country. And I don't know, was it Trace Adkins, Honky Tonk Badonkadonk? Sure, I can get behind that, but admittedly, that song really wasn't written by Trace Adkins. It was written by Dan Huff, who is in one of my favorite metal bands or hard rock bands of all time, that being Giant. So, there's just a couple degrees of separation there. But, I can listen to all kinds of stuff, but metal is really, I do think it's very much, it along with, say, classical or more instrumental, to me is the epitome of music. It's the epitome of complexity of, it's complex music. It doesn't have to be, it could be very simple music sometimes. Okay. But, a lot of it is very complex stuff, and granted, a lot of the complex stuff doesn't really get radio play, but I don't give a shit. I buy albums. That's fine. Like I bought Sons of Apollo that came out a couple months back or a few months back. And that was amazing. I mean, that was awesome. I mean, it didn't hurt that you have Mike Portnoy and Jeff Scott Soto involved. And I think it was Billy Sheehan in that. I think Billy Sheehan was a part of that. I mean, you have just a tremendous super group right there. So sure, I bought the album, I didn't even wait for it to get out on torrent. So I was like, no, I'll pre-order it on, whatever music service I ended up using. So, I even buy classic albums still. You know what? Because here's an example. Okay, here's a quick example. A band called Steelheart, which, by the way, so this is a band, they had one major hit, and they had another song that was kind of big. Everybody Loves Eileen was a song that kind of charted. It wasn't big, it kind of charted. Off of their first album, Steelheart, which I think came out in 90 or 91. But they had the song I'll Never Let You Go. It's a ballad, and it's a badass ballad. It's awesome. The lead singer for Steelheart actually did the bulk of the singing in the movie Rockstar with Mark Wahlberg, which that has an incredible soundtrack, with Steel Dragon and all that. That was really cool. Anyway, they had an album come out in September of 2017, and it was okay. It wasn't like the greatest thing I've ever heard in my life, but it was okay. I mean, their last great album was probably their third, which I think was called Wait, that came out in 95. But anyway, on torrent sites, and believe me, I've bought their albums many times over, but on torrent sites, I was trying to get, when that new album came out, I was like, oh shit, you know what? Why don't I have Steelheart in my collection? And so, I went to go find Steelheart on the torrent sites, and, I get their first album, which is the album that if anybody knows Steelheart, that's probably what they know them for. And the timing was way off on this album. Like, timing meaning that the beginning of a subsequent song would be in the first track. Like parts of track 2 would be in track 1, and then parts of track 3 would be in track 2. And like whoever ripped the CD just completely fucked up. And the weird thing is that all the torrents that at least I found, which I wouldn't claim that those are all the torrents on planet Earth for Steelheart's first CD. All the torrents that I found all came off of the same master. Or master copy, whenever the fuck that was made. And in fact, I remembered that the last time that I had Steelheart MP3s, that's exactly like, it was the same deal. And it's like, oh, what the fuck? So the only way I really had that song, I think it was like on a compilation album called Monster Madness that I had the big song, I'll Never Let You Go. So whatever, I went to Amazon and I hashed out $5.99. Woohoo, what a big price back when I used to, in the 90s, when I'd buy CDs and I'd end up, paying $20 a pop. Okay, but it was $5.99 for the MP3s, and it was perfect. It didn't have that encoding or didn't have that track. I don't even know what to call it. Track listing problem. I'll call it that, I guess, or track encoding problem. I don't know. And you know, and okay. So I mean, I'll buy classic albums too. It's not like I just buy new stuff, but I still buy music. You know, like please don't confuse me. Like if I'm really passionate about something, or if I really need something or want something to top off my collection, yeah, I'll pay out the money. But that said, we live in a world today where there is so much music getting produced because it's so easy to make an album now. I mean, it is so easy to make an album now that, you know, how could you possibly, I mean, I think you'd have to be ridiculously wealthy to be able to even purchase all of the great music out there. So, you know, I understand that, okay? But granted, YouTube really helps you kind of try before you buy. Like, that's nice. Like, most of what I talk about here, you could find on YouTube very easily, you know, and give it a listen. So I'm not going to be in You Need Metal 1 and 2, I actually put in parts of the songs. I'm not going to be doing that with You Need Metal 3, and part of that is because of my own personal rules and restrictions that I put on Patreon content, okay? You know, because I make money off of this, I put it under different rules over what copyrighted material I'll put into, you know, into this sort of thing, just to keep from any kind of, like, legal trouble, you know, from happening. Not that I'm afraid of legal trouble, but just... there's no need. I mean, because it's not like, I mean, how many people are listening? How many potential people could listen to this episode right now? 108 people. Why ruin, you know, a beautiful thing going for just so few or not so few? I mean, because that makes it sound like I'm belittling you when I'm not. You know, that's amazing. Most people don't have, you know, 30 patrons, let alone over 100. Okay. I mean, I'm in the, as far as, you know, Patreon stats, I'm in very high performance. So, you know, but just, it's not, in this case, it's not worth the risk. If I thought it was worth the risk, I'd do it. So that's the purpose of doing episodes like this, is to hopefully, you know, be a little bit of a filter and introduce you to stuff that maybe you just completely missed, never came on your radar, because, you know, of just the deluge, you know, of metal alone that's out there. I mean, it's got to be, you know, I'm amazed at what bands I learn about that I'd never heard of before. And oftentimes, like, listeners will tell me about it, and they'll say, well, I figured you already knew about it because you seem to just be on top of all the shit. And I'm like, well, you know, I can't be on top of everything. So if it's something that doesn't, like, get radio play or, like, doesn't headline, you know, some kind of, I don't know, some upcoming fest of some kind, I mean, you know, there's a chance that I don't know about it. And I think some of the bands that I'm going to mention here, some of them you've probably heard of, some of them I've mentioned in the past on Sovereign Tech if you're a longtime listener, but a lot of the patrons are new listeners. And so, I want to highlight these people that are newer, that are really, you know, still putting out amazing stuff. But, and I don't, you know, this is the funny thing, is that for some of these people, I have a hard time telling, you know, whether they're in a full-on studio or if they're doing this from their bedroom. Like a band that was in one of the previous You Need Metals, that is a newer metal band that I think is doing great work, even though I wasn't as impressed with their latest album, is a band called Kissin' Dynamite. Okay, Kissin', not kissing, but Kissin' with a, you know, an apostrophe. Kissin' Dynamite. I think especially their album Megalomania is phenomenal. Money, Sex, and Power, another phenomenal album. Their first album, Addicted to Metal, incredible. I know for a fact that at least their latest album, or I think even Megalomania, they did from their bedroom on their computer. Like, I mean, the guy literally just sat there, you know, in like Finland or something, and was just playing his guitar on his bed right into his computer, more or less. And I mean, obviously there was, you know, some in-betweens there, but and that's how he recorded that album. Holy shit. And yet it's one of the hardest rockers that you can listen to. I mean, it's not like, you know, again, it's not or anything like that. It's more melodic and maybe would fit better under hard rock, but they claim to be metal, and who am I to argue with them? So it's incredible that can happen today. Okay. And because of that, again, you can miss out on a lot of bands, even bands that maybe have somewhat bigger names. A lot of these might be bigger names, but I think they're modern, but I think people still forget the fact that they're really out there. Okay. And there's quite a few bands that have been, or like bands that would fit under the criteria that I'm describing now, that have already appeared in previous You Need Metals. Okay. Like, for example, Amaranth was in a previous You Need Metal. Kissin' Dynamite, like I mentioned, was in a previous You Need Metal. I think I might have mentioned Nightwish or Within Temptation. Those are a couple other bands that could easily fit in this mold, even though Nightwish has been around for a long time now, like a really long time, or even like Camelot and some of these others. They're not 80s bands, they're not grunge bands. There's something that came kind of after. Some people want to call it like power metal, sort of like a Dragon Force, who could easily fit in this list. My love for Dragon Force has been well documented on Sovereign Tech. But yeah, so there's quite a few bands that I could certainly mention outside of what are in this actual top 8. I mean, there's tons of them. There's a laundry list. Black Country Communion. I mean, the Struts. There's Art of Anarchy, Crazy Licks, Unleash the Archers. I mean, there's tons of them. Okay, so but that's the thing. It's just here's 8 to try out, to sample, and then maybe as you're looking for these people's music, you'll get recommendations for like Brother Fire Tribe will come up or something, and and you go, oh wow, and you'll check that out and you'll be amazed or whatever. And it's, sometimes I have to admit, like if you go to Amazon, okay, and if you type in fact, this will be, we'll break right into it. This will be our first band, and again, these are in no particular order. Even though it's a top 8, there's really no number 1. Though if there were, this might be number 1. This first band we're going to mention, okay. But if you type these guys into Amazon, you will, and in fact, to get some of their albums, Amazon's the only store I could find that has them, at least digitally. You'll end up with, in the, suggested as or whatever, you're going to find a ton of names of bands that really do kick some serious ass, be it hard rock or a little more metal or whatever. You're really going to find it. And so that's a handy thing, it's just on Amazon that comes up. iTunes doesn't do it as well as from what I've noticed. Google Play Music is very clearly beholden to the music industry. In fact, it's my number 1 complaint about Google Play Music, aside from the fact that they like replaced and deleted a bunch of my songs. Google Play Music does nothing to help you find new music. Like it absolutely does not. This is a place where Pandora really shines too. But Google Play Music does not shine in this way. Google Play Music will only really highlight, like the big acts. It's really insulting, in fact, because Google makes such a big deal about, all our algorithms are going to help everything get personalized for you. The fuck they do. No, they don't. It's bullshit. So anyway, using Amazon, that might actually help, because Amazon doesn't have to, they don't listen to anybody. They're running all their own shit, everything comes out of Labs 126. But so let's start off with number 1. Number 1 is a band called H.E.A.T, and it's H.E.A.T. And I don't know that even means anything, but it's just that's what they go by, is H.E.A.T, and it's a Swedish band, obviously more hard rock, and they'll get in a lot of synth into, like, they definitely play with, it's melodic rock, but they definitely play with the genre quite a bit, okay, because you'll get a lot of synth in there, which I think is totally welcome. And also they will put in, and this is, oh my God, let's see, so they have 5 albums. They have 5 albums. There was their first album that came out in 2008, which was self-titled, so it was called H.E.A.T. Then there was their second album in 2010 called Freedom Rock. Both of those albums aren't bad. They're pretty good. But then they get to, in 2012, they get to the album Address the Nation. This album is white hot. I mean, it is white hot. It is, in fact, it's downright fucking sexy. Even the title, or the lead track off of it, Breaking the Silence, which, who knew that somebody could make another song called Breaking the Silence? It's as badass as the one originally done by Queensryche off of Operation Mindcrime, right? I mean, like, Stephanie asks me to play it all the time. It's just this really intense, like, arena rocker. It is so cool. But there's other songs on there that, like In and Out of Trouble, where they bring in a saxophone. And I when I was first listening to the album, and look, I just discovered H.E.A.T because they had a new album come out called Into the Great Unknown in 2017. I just found out about them like maybe 2-3 months ago when Into the Great Unknown came out, which is also just a fantastic album. I mean, like stem to stern. There's not a bad track on there. It opens right up with Bastard of Society, goes into Redefined, which is one of the best. I mean, just one of the best songs I've heard in a very long time. And then there's the title track, Into the Great Unknown, Shit City. I mean, there's like all these awesome songs off that album. Anyway, when I first put on Address the Nation, because when I heard Into the Great Unknown, I was like, all right, I got to hear everything else by these guys. This is crazy. And it's probably the most excited I had been in finding a band since, that wasn't popular in America. Because I think Into the Great Unknown might be like the first really official release that got some American metal, music press of some kind. Everything else was, just more or less released in Europe, Sweden and all that. Which, by the way, like that whole, eastern part of Europe and, that those parts of Europe, like that is a haven for melodic metal, melodic rock. It really is, even though ironically, it's also kind of the place by a lot of people's metric where a lot of death metal and, the antithesis to melodic rock and melodic metal, really came from. But, anyway. So, H.E.A.T, the Address the Nation, I'm checking this out, and I was saying, so yeah, this is the most excited I'd been since like Dragon Force, where Dragon Force, I knew about before, everybody heard Through the Fire and the Flames on Guitar Hero. That's what broke Dragon Force, was that they put him, it was like the final stage on Guitar Hero, although, that was like a decade ago. I'd known about them. I'd gotten imports from them, a couple, years previous. And then when their third album came out, I mean, they just exploded. And now they've kind of gone back into, I don't know, a lot of people seem to know about them, or they stopped listening to them or something, when they're still coming out with their best shit. But I remember how excited I was about Dragon Force. I mean, fucking A, like blew my mind. I mean, you don't understand how crazy of a Dragon Force fan I am. I have a scarf, and I've had it for a long time. I have a scarf about Dragon Force that I got from their official merch store. They used to have, oh man, and the t-shirts they used to have, I'm a power metal slut and all that. Oh, I love that shit. Anyway, So H.E.A.T, like, this is a band where I am going to be keeping an eye on every little single thing they do, because they are just so badass and they introduce so much stuff. But yeah, so I'm listening to Address the Nation, and, right from the opener, it's fantastic. Every track is solid, and then it gets into In and Out of Trouble, and the saxophone starts playing. I mean, it's kind of a ballad, kind of. And the saxophone comes in, and I'm just like, oh my God. And I just wanted to take off my underwear. I just want to take off all my clothes and just start tossing it at the band, like wherever I was, even though the band wasn't there, obviously. It was so sexy. It was so hot hearing that. I mean, it'll blow your mind. I wish I could play it for you right now, Ooh. So H.E.A.T, and they had another album after Address the Nation. Address the Nation might be my favorite album by them. Out of their 5. But there's the sequel album to that in 2014, Tearing Down the Walls, another, solid rock album. And then Into the Great Unknown, I think, is incredible. In fact, I've been very tempted to use songs from Into the Great Unknown in the holiday special. But we'll see if that, but that's how fucking amazing, like that the music is on that. In fact, it probably will be used on the holiday special. I was just so impressed. Yeah, I mean, this band just destroys. I mean, again, it's melodic. It's not, if your brand of metal is only the, this isn't for you. But if you can listen to, stuff that's sexy, this is for you. This is as good as, almost as good as it can get. So anyway, yeah, H.E.A.T is phenomenal. But, there's a chance, and I don't know, there's a chance that H.E.A.T, much like Kiss and Dynamite, they might be recording all this intricate music and this beautiful sounding music in their bedroom. They might not even be in a studio, for fuck's sake. And I mean, really, that does blow my mind. But this is a band that 20, 30 years ago, this band would have been the biggest thing in the world. Like they would have taken Guns N' Roses to task, in my opinion. Like they in fact, I think that what these guys put out there is so, I mean, it's like Firehouse X10, and I think their music is just, it's so solid. It's hard to say it, but like, it's beautiful. Like, it's genuinely beautiful, that I think they would have kept Nirvana from like being a thing. Like they really would have. This band should have existed in 1993. and if it did, we would have, I think, a very different world, because I've talked about this briefly in the past, but I think music shapes a lot of perception for people, and not just music as in the music they listen to, but the music around them. And anyway, that's a long story, but there you go. So H.E.A.T, H-E-A-T, and that's like an acronym. Again, I don't know what the hell the acronym stands for, and I can't really find an answer. So there you go. Out of Sweden, just phenomenal. Okay, let's move on to our next band. Now, our next band, this is one, they've been around for a little while. They've been around since like 2004, and not really going to I'm sure other people have actually heard of this band. And it's Alter Bridge. Now, here's the thing. Maybe some people are laughing. Okay, so Alter Bridge is a quasi-Christian band. I know some people want to make claims of that. And it is the band, it's really the sequel band to Creed, which I've talked about Creed before. I am a fan of Creed, okay, and Scott Stapp specifically. But there were problems with Scott Stapp. There were problems with, Scott Phillips, was that their drummer? And so, but they didn't, Mark Tremonti is this amazing talent, and he didn't want to stop. Or was it Brian Marshall that went out? Anyway, whatever, it doesn't matter. Mark Tremonti is the main story here. He didn't want to stop, and he has, tons of writing chops, and, one could argue he's very much the brain behind much of what was going on in Creed anyway. And so he created a sequel band, and it's called Alter Bridge. And Alter Bridge would probably be even more famous for introducing the world to Myles Kennedy, who is one of the, this guy is such a dynamic metal singer. He ends up getting to sing for Slash, like he's the lead in Slash's band. He'll go and do stuff with the remains of Led Zeppelin. He'll go, he just does, he's all over the place. Myles Kennedy is one of the most wanted guys, shall we say, in metal, as far as singers go. So, you can thank Alter Bridge for that. But I think Alter Bridge, and they've had quite a few albums over the years, and I liked One Day Remains. Like the song Metalingus is one of the most badass metal songs ever done. I just love it. It's so intense and powerful. In fact, the wrestler Edge, one of my favorite wrestlers of all time, he, the Rated R superstar, wonder where the name Rated R radio star came from for Brian Sovryn. He used to come out to that song, and it was just intense every time he'd come out. Dun, 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 dun. It's such a cool song. Their second album, Blackbird, I wasn't so much impressed with that. AB3, which was their third album, also wasn't the greatest thing ever. But then in 2014, they came out with Fortress. And then just this past year, they came out with The Last Hero. Those two albums, Fortress especially, awesome. Heavy, serious, and of course Myles Kennedy there, you get the melodic singing. It delivers on all fronts. There's nothing sexy about it, but it is real rock. And you are real metal, and you feel it. You really feel it. And so credit to them. And credit to Mark Tremonti, because he also has another band that is going to make this list. But yeah, Alter Bridge, it's very different from Creed. Like, it's a sequel band, but really, One Day Remains kind of sounds like Creed, but everything after that does not so much sound like Creed. Or if it does sound like Creed, it sounds more like the heavier shit off of Creed's album Weathered, which I would argue is Creed's best album. Not their last. They had Full Circle years later when they did a reunion, but was originally kind of their last album, which was Weathered, which, that opens up with the song Bullets. You don't exactly get things like Bullets, and as great as Myles Kennedy is, he doesn't deliver the same, for lack of a better term, because obviously I don't believe that these things exist, but for lack of a better term, the same soul, really, that Scott Stapp can deliver. And if you've never listened to, like, Scott Stapp's, like, The Great Divide, like his solo stuff, you don't know. You don't know just what that guy brings to the table. And I'm not going to tell, like, stories about all their Christian nonsense and whatever. But some people felt that, like, Alter Bridge is this very Christian band. Mark Tremonti admits to being Christian, but he said that it's not, like, really a part of his music, at least what he does with Alter Bridge. And to even get further away from that more, and look, I'm an atheist, folks. Obviously, I'm not that interested in, listening to Christian music. So if I thought it was Christian, I wouldn't like it so much. Here's an example. Okay, so you had the band Skillet. If and I know that's the funniest goddamn name in the world. Okay, you had the band Skillet, which I thought was, well, they're openly a Christian band, and they'll play at Christian festivals, just where Alter Bridge I don't think really would do that. And Creed didn't either, because Creed is also another band, very much accused of being, being a Christian band, and that there's like secretly Christian lyrics. Yeah, that might have been true in their first album or something, and maybe their second, but like Weathered, no, that was long gone. Anyway, so like Skillet, right? So I don't give a shit about them. Then they have their huge hits with the album Awake, which not going to get into the conspiracies around that album, because it's kind of weird. The cover of the album is a giant one eye, which any Christian should know that might be a problem. Even though I know there's Christians who claim that it's the one eye of God, and that's fine. But you're on the wrong side of history. Sorry. So the album Awake, which has Awake and Alive, Monster, I Need a Hero, like a lot of these really, these were all top 10 songs, and I thought that was a badass album. And then they had Rise follow up afterwards, which was okay. And then they had Unleashed and everything. I'll listen to Skillet, admittedly, but I only listen to Awake after. And I know Comatose is supposedly like a pretty good album, but no, I'm interested in the stuff that's like post their openly Christian shit. So yeah, if I think a band is like really Christian, honestly, like I'm not going to listen to them. Growing up, like when my family converted to Christianity, again, I'm an atheist now. I would listen to Petra. I'd listen to some of these other, Christian hard rock bands. And actually that's how I started listening to one of my favorite bands of all time. Which, people can laugh about this. And I have friends that chide me about it to this day. Stryper. I think Stryper is tremendous, but let me tell you something. I also think, and look, I don't buy into any of the spiritual nonsense. I don't buy into any supernaturalism whatsoever. I think Stryper is playing for the other team. If there was actually this paradigm of, Christ versus Satan, I hate to break it to you, Stryper is not playing for Christ. And it's not just because, like, one of their albums that actually was designed to not be Christian at all was Against the Law. That's an awesome hard rock album. Okay. But they, their other stuff, To Hell with the Devil, obviously their biggest song and everything. They had that album Reborn and some others. Say what you want. Those guys are not playing, they're not playing for the good guys. Like I think, what's the guy's name? Michael Sweet, their lead singer. I think that guy's like a total Satanist. I'm getting conspiratorial with all that, but it's the same thing. Like, okay, so here we go. So here's a little story, right? With Creed. So what happens with Creed? Suddenly you find out that, Scott Stapp, this great Christian and everything, he's, the Creed's opening up for Kid Rock or something, and Scott Stapp and Kid Rock are, fucking a bunch of groupies before the show. How Christian is that? Well, it's not Christian, and that's why he kept running into trouble and he got into alcoholism and all that shit. And so, look, when you get into that industry, this stuff kind of happens. And I think, and there have been plenty of other metal bands from like the 80s and 90s, contemporaries of Stryper's heyday, especially, where, they said, they would come out and say, those guys are Christian? And they just like shake their head. No way. So I think they're even worse. I think they know what they're doing, and it's funny because pastors used to like you can listen to like classic sermons of where pastors were talking about Stryper, and they would say that the song To Hell with the Devil wasn't actually saying like, to hell with that guy, which means like get away Satan or something, like not today, Satan. No, they're actually saying go to hell with Satan, have fun with Satan, go, to hell with the devil. And I kind of agree with the pastors, but in my book, I think it's a good thing. I'm like, great. You're on my team. Well, my team is only the team of hedonism. Obviously, I don't think that there's a literal Satan. Okay. And I, like I said, I'm an atheist. I don't believe in any kind of supernaturalism or anything like that. Boy, so we went on that big road. My point being is that I don't listen to Christian bands. So if you have a band, if you hear a band here in this list that you think is Christian, if I heard, and believe me, this is another thing, like my supernaturalism and my Christianity meter is another one. Like just the littlest bit's going to set me off. I'm not going to have it. Look, and it's not because like I hate Christians or something. I don't. A lot of you listening to my voice right now are Christians. Okay. And you know, I respect the hell out of you, and you know that we appreciate each other and all that. And that's what matters. Okay. And not every Christian is the same, blah, blah, blah. So obviously I can't make such an abstract statement like I hate Christians. I mean, that's ridiculous, to really to make that claim. Okay. But yeah, I don't want to listen to Christian music. I just don't. And even some of like the really great stuff, like I can admit, oh, Carmen's the Champion. Holy shit. That's epic as fuck, but I'm not interested. So, but that's just me. Okay. Just like I assume Christians don't want to listen to music praising Satan. I imagine you're not listening to Venom, or you're not listening to Guar, or I don't know, which Guar could have made this list too. I love Guar. But anyway, okay, so there. I hope I clarified that whole matter. So Alter Bridge, they're just a metal band. That's all. I don't think that they're like sneaking in Christian messages or anything like that. Not really, or at least not in any way that's in any way meaningful, frankly. So let's move on to the other band. I mean, while we're talking about Mark Tremonti, well, because of the claims that were leveled against him that he was actually Alter Bridge was actually a Christian band. He ended up creating another band, pretty much a solo project called just Tremonti, and how can you claim that that's Christian? Well, Mark Tremonti's Christian. Yeah, but listen to these albums. And really, Tremonti Mark Tremonti's done 4 albums. And it's not just him, but it's considered a solo project. But Tremonti, there's been 4 albums. All I Was, Cauterize, Dust, and their 4th album's actually coming out soon, which I can't wait for. But Cauterize and Dust, All I Was good, but Cauterize and Dust, oh man, heavy, and melodic at the same time, but really heavy. I mean, this is grade A metal playing going on. Straight to head, not the most complex stuff in the world, but really, like just hitting all the notes, every way that you can on a metal album. I think that just 2 of the best albums to come out, really, and they came out back to back. Cauterize came out in 2015, Dust came out in 2016. Like I said, they came out back to back. I mean, they're some of the best albums I've heard, at least in the past 5 years. I mean, easily, like they could easily sit in the top 10 of best albums of the past 5 years. Just phenomenal. Mark Tremonti himself is obviously an amazing musician, with all the shit that he can put together. I mean, because you're talking about, Tremonti's big on like the festival, on the music festival, metal festival scene. Maybe not so much on radio. I don't know. I don't really listen to metal radio anymore, so I can't really say if he's getting a whole lot of radio play. Of course, debating how much does that even matter anymore. But this is a guy who is the brains behind 3 huge bands, Creed, Alter Bridge, and whether Alter Bridge, whether you stop listening to him at this point, or, certainly everybody was listening to One Day Remains. But I mean, you have Creed, Alter Bridge, and then his own little solo project, Tremonti. I mean, and this is just some of the best metal music out there. So kudos. I'm glad Mark Tremonti's out there, because he's keeping the fucking, the sound of electric guitar alive in a very real sense, and a melodic, and more of a melodic sound still alive, where it doesn't have to have, I mean, look, I don't mind thrash. I don't mind, any of that other stuff. That's fine. Have fun with it. But to have something, music with a point, not a Christian message, but maybe a message, maybe, there's a meaning to it, and whatever else. I think that's fantastic. If you haven't listened to the Tremonti albums, check out Dust, and I can't wait. A Dying Machine comes out this year. I'm really looking forward, to that one. So, I mean, there's, I'm still feeling kind of stuck on the whole Christian band thing, but whatever, doesn't matter. Let's move on with our list. Alter Bridge and Tremonti are probably bands that people have heard of. And I guess while we're talking about ones that people could have potentially heard of, let's stick on that, and then we'll get into the ones that maybe you hadn't. This band is, I had the great pleasure of seeing them way back in, like, I guess this would have been 10 years ago, maybe 07, 08, something like that. After their first album, their self-titled album came out. And I saw them at a K-Rockathon in upstate New York. And I was blown away, just blown away by what they, and I don't know that I heard their songs previous. I heard, okay, there's going to be a female lead singer in this, and she plays the guitar. Awesome. I want to see that. I want to see what this is all about. That's a little something different from the Sausage Fest that's there. And I go to see it, and I'm just, like I said, I'm floored. And the band is Halestorm. Now, I've talked about them many times, and I'm sure it was 2015's, or maybe it was 2014's, Into the Wildlife, which is their last album. They have another album coming out very soon in 2018. Very excited for that. That had to be my album pick of the year, because I think that's one of the best albums metal albums ever done. And I consider them an absolute metal band. Some people want to put them more in a hard rock-genre. Again, I don't really differentiate those two. Hard rock and metal are for me, it's I don't like to use the term big tent, but it's one big tent in my book. Okay. I don't really have anything like in my music collection that I label as hard rock. I just see it all as metal. And Halestorm is a band led by Lizzie Hale. She is awesome. She is a fucking goddess. Okay. This is a band that keeps a lot of classic metal alive. And of course they even do that with, they have, not Reanimator. They have the remix albums that they do that are amazing. In fact, they'll even take some classic more poppy songs, like they did Heart's All I Want to Do Is Make Love to You. And I think, no, it's not Reanimator. I could look it up. But anyway, they are, oh man, it is so wild to hear that song given a really serious, heavy metal. Reanimate, that's what they're called. And there's been 3 of them. There's Reanimate 2.0, and Reanimate 3.0. Reanimator, wasn't that like a Linkin Park remix album of some kind? Anyway, just amazing what they can do with classic songs. Like I think on Reanimate 3.0, they even did Ride the Lightning from Metallica. Badass. I mean, it sounded great. And Lizzie singing it. She is, ooh. But anyway, from their first album back, I guess so it must have been 2009 when that actually came out. Their first album came out in 2009, and that was the self-titled Halestorm. That had the song I Get Off. Fuck. That is so sexy. And this is a band that openly admits to they call themselves libertines. I mean, this is as hedonist as you can get. Their sequel album, Strange Case of, of course it's not Mr., that's alluding to the title of the classic book, The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. But it's the Strange Case of, it would be Miss Hyde, which is one of the songs off of that. This band's interesting for a few reasons, okay? Some of this they've admitted to, some of this I think is theory. So, this is, again, totally hedonist band, and I think Lizzie Hale, I think she lives it up with the boys and the girls, if you know what I mean. I think she really lives it up. And like I said, they have no problem with calling themselves hedonists, libertines, and all that. So obviously I can really relate. And they have, they totally have an understanding and appreciation and love for metal from the 70s, from the 80s, including the likes of Motley Crue, Poison, and all that in the 90s, even though their music really can have its own flavor. Okay. So with Halestorm, this was a more straight ahead, kind of rock, hard rock album from, that would play on kind of like the post grunge scene. Okay. Even though it has a very melodic flair to it, through quite a bit of it. And there's some really almost emo songs on it, but some of those are done so well. In fact, one of them was when I first saw them at K-Rockathon, Familiar Taste of Poison off their first album. That song, oh man, that is just some dark, cheesy shit that I just love. And she's even drinking the chalice of blood wine on the stage when she did it. Oh man, that was good shit. Anyway, so, yeah, when they would come out with The Strange Case of, that's just the title of it, The Strange Case of. When they came out with that, I think that they were patterning themselves after another one of my favorite bands of all time, that being Skid Row. Where with Skid Row, when their self-titled came out, was that 89 or 90? When Skid Row's self-titled came out, they had this awesome bridging sound between, say, a Motley Crue and Guns N' Roses, and they were as big as Guns N' Roses really in their day, and yes, they were. Deal with it. And then in it was a 92 or whatever when when Skid Row's second album came out, Slave to the Grind, which was that like, I think it was one of the first metal album that ever went number one on Billboard, I think was that Quiet Riot's Mental Health? Anyway, Slave to the Grind hit some kind of crazy record. I forget what the record was that it broke, but it hit some kind of crazy record. But what was amazing is Slave to the Grind was ridiculously heavier than their self-titled album. I mean, it blows your mind just how much heavier that it really is. And I think, that was very different for a band to do, because usually what would happen is you would have a band come out with a very heavy album, and then they would start to tone stuff down, because if their very heavy album was very popular, they would want to try and build more success. And so they would make their music, give it a little more mainstream appeal. Skid Row did the exact opposite, with their second album. And I think Halestorm did the same thing, where with the strange case of, it's a much harder album, a weirder album. And I'm not even like the biggest fan of that album, but I get it. And I think that the overall message that it's putting out there is very sexy, very hot. But then they came out with, when 2012 rolled around, I was like, okay, listening to it. All right. Yeah, this is pretty good. I'll go back to listening to their first album, which is just track for track, magic. Then in 2015, they come out with Into the Wildlife. And this album, talk about track to track magic. This album is amazing. Just one, I put it as one of the best albums to just ever get released, bar none. And I can't wait to see. I mean, it's amazing they've only had 3 albums, even though they've done a bunch of EPs. They've done the Reanimate EPs where they do covers of various classic pop and metal songs, all of which are great. I love what this band does. They're creating an entire. They're really creating an entire universe around themselves. Because, Lizzie Hale just has this personality, this charisma, this aura, for lack of a better term. Again, I don't believe in supernaturalism, but this aura that, where she can sell classic stuff and classic metal and whatever else, to a modern audience, which is amazing. So I am such a huge supporter of their work. I can't wait to hear their 4th album. I'm sure it's going to be amazing. But Into the Wildlife alone is worth listening to every single fucking track. I mean, just every track. Right when it opens up with, is it Scream? Yeah, it opens up a Scream, then it goes into I Am the Fire, Sick Individual, Can I Get an Amen? Oh, that sounds great. Dear Daughter's a little bit of a weaker one, but I get it. It's one for the girls, and it's. I mean, guys can dig it too, sure. But, I understand the importance of that. But then it goes into New Modern Love, Mayhem, Bad Girls World, Gonna Get Mine is awesome. It's just like this real chanting song that you can, or where you can just want to chant the chorus. The Reckoning, Apocalyptic, I Like It Heavy. I mean, there's so much cool shit in this. Yeah, just one of the best albums of all time, in my opinion. It really is. So, okay, let's move on from Halestorm. You're going to want to check them out if you haven't. I've mentioned them before many times because they're one of my favorite acts, partly because ideologically, philosophically, we're on the same page, and I think we have a very similar mission, where we're wanting to live very unconventional lives. We're pushing hedonism, the libertine side of things, and having a good time and, just rocking it out. I really feel a real kinship with that band as far as like what kind of media, what they're creating. I feel it, and that's what I try to, in many ways, do with Sovereign Tech. So our next band is one that has a little bit of Sovereign Tech history as well, which is their song, actually a couple of their songs have been featured in Sovereign Tech episodes. And one of them particularly was Runaways, which was off of their album Armageddonize, and which came out in 2015. And that song was used in Soviet Tech 2. And so a lot of people, really wondered, what the hell was that song? That song was so badass and amazing and fast-paced. That's what it was. It was the band Eclipse. Now, Eclipse has been around since 2001, and they have I think they have 8 or 9 albums now. Okay. This is more of your melodic hard rock style. Okay. But they can get heavier. And in some of their earlier albums, like Bleed and Scream, Are You Ready to Rock? They really do get into, a much heavier sound, even though they would dalliance with the melodic with Armageddonize and Momentum. And I think even the name Armageddonize, is copying, like that's kind of taking playing off of the names that Def Leppard used to give to their albums, right? Like Adrenalize, just like Halestorm would copy what Skid Row did, where, their second album would be really heavy. Did I even get to that point with Halestorm, where that was the whole point of telling you about Skid Row, was that Halestorm was copying what Skid Row did, where their second album, they went way, way heavier. And then their third album, they kind of brought it all back. But anyway, that was my point with that. But Eclipse is, not every album is that grand, but like Armageddonize itself is worth knowing about this band, just to listen to that album. Their album that came out in 2017, Monumentum, is tremendous. Like, I mean, it's not as good as Armageddonize, but it's solid. Lots of fun to be had on that album as well. So you're going to want to check that out. But Eclipse definitely would have fit in, in the late 80s, early 90s rock scene, metal scene, would have been picture perfect for it. They have kind of a Def Leppard feel, which, understand, Def Leppard can get into a very more metal, harder metal style if they want to. They had done it previously. I mean, with High and Dry, and even like Slang, which is one of my favorite albums by Def Leppard. They could get into that much, much harder, darker sound. Eclipse can do that too. So you definitely want to check them out. But let's get on to another band. And speaking of harder sound, these are guys with a harder sound, more of a power metal style, almost a Dragon Force, not really, but almost a Dragon Force. Not exactly like Powerwolf, but kind of getting there. Okay. That's where Powerwolf is more like a darker power metal sound. Iron Savior, who I've talked about on Sovereign Tech in the past. In fact, their album Titancraft was holy shit. And what's amazing about Iron Savior, they're kind of like the modern day Dream Theater. All of their albums are actually concept albums. All of their albums have a science fiction story that they're telling about, like the ship, the Iron Savior. That's where the name of the band comes from. And it's this huge science fiction story. I think it's so cool. I listen to this band's albums, end to end. In fact, in the past year, they did kind of a re-release of some of their classic songs. It was called Reforged, Riding on Fire, where because they have been in this game since like 97. So this is one of those bands that's actually been around for a while. But I don't think they saw any real success until like maybe Megatropolis, or The Landing, which, a couple of their later albums from like 2007 and 2011. But this is, very heavy stuff. Still has largely a melodic singer. They'll mix it up sometimes. But I am just so impressed that they have this continued story going for like 10 albums. I mean, that's awesome. I love that kind of concept, and that they're pulling it off, and that you still write, hit songs around this awesome story that they're telling in this science fiction universe. I think that that's so cool and so unique. For them to really to do that, definitely might be the most unique band out of the bunch here, as far as what they're doing, what they're delivering, and what they're putting out there. And they're still putting it out there. Like I said, Titancraft, I think Titancraft's their best album, and that's pretty much their latest one as far as like a completely new album. How do you do that? I don't know. 10 years into your career and you're making your best music now? Kiss did that too, but that's amazing when any band can do that. I have to give them, or not 10, 20 years into their career. Sorry, not 10, 20 years. That's crazy. Wow. And Kiss still did that, by the way. When you consider that it was about 20 years later between the, Kiss self-title and Revenge, which Revenge is arguably Kiss's greatest album. And that came out, 92, 93, whatever. I mean, it's, and Kiss came out in 74. That's about 20 years. I think that's incredible, to be able to pull that off. And they did. Wow. Bravo. You totally belong on this list. You want to start off with Titancraft, and then you can listen to Reforged, and you can get introduced to a lot of what the band had done previously. And I think you're in for a really good time. And again, it's such a cool concept for them to do. I love it. Okay, let's get into another harder band, that being Fozzy, which I don't know if anybody was expecting this. I I've been a fan of this band. Obviously, I became a fan because originally Fozzy was made up of the members of a band called Stuck Mojo, which didn't exactly get the biggest, they didn't exactly, I mean, they got record deals, but they didn't exactly make it. Okay. But Stuck Mojo joined forces with a wrestler, that being Chris Jericho, who Chris Jericho is really kind of a pop culture phenomenon now, as many wrestlers will often, or not many, but as some wrestlers will become. They become bigger than their craft. And Chris Jericho would eventually get together with, this would be like in the year 2000 or so, he would get together with the guys of Stuck Mojo and they would start a metal band. And Chris Jericho can sing, even though I think in some of the albums, depending on which album we're talking about, in some of the albums, I think he's doing a lot of, using a lot of Pro Tools perhaps after the fact to give him a certain sound. Because if you listen to, so they have like 7 albums. They just had Judas come out in 2017, which I thought was an awesome album. It was one of the ones that, I pre-ordered and I wanted it the instant I could listen to it, because the title track that they released early, that being the song Judas, was so catchy. Had, such great metal, and this is real metal, folks. Like, this is metal. This is not hard rock. This is fucking metal. Okay. It just hits you. Like, it's so catchy. You sing the song forever. It's so good, or it's so cool. So they have been, some of their albums, like if you listen to Chasing the Grail from 2010, even Sin and Bones from 2012, I kind of get the sense Chris Jericho, either he was intentionally doing it or he did it in post, in the editing room or whatever, where he really sounds like Ozzy Osbourne. Like, he sounds creepily like Ozzy Osbourne, but nowhere else in any of the other albums does he ever really sound like that. The first album I knew them from, their first album, Fozzy, I think was all cover songs. Not that that's a bad thing, but then they did another album in 2002, which is kind of their first one where they more or less brought it out actually on Monday Night Raw, on wrestling, which is where I really heard about it. It was called Happenstance, which To Kill a Stranger, I think, was the lead track off of that. There's like 4 new songs on it, and the rest of them were cover songs. The 4 new songs that were on Happenstance blew me away. I thought they were awesome. Really just raw, balls to the wall metal. And then they did a full album in 2005, a few years later, called All That Remains. That was all original songs. Just as good. I really enjoyed that. I don't think they really have a bad album. Chasing the Grail was good. I mean, even though there's the funny stuff with Jericho's voice, Sin and Bones was solid. Do You Want to Start a War? This is a very unique album. And in fact, they do some cover songs in this again. In fact, they do ABBA's SOS. But it works amazingly as a metal album. It's incredible, or as a metal song. It's really, you got to hear it to believe it. But they have a song on there on Do You Want to Start a War, When the Lights Go Out, that is this really, like, it's a metal song you could almost dance to. It's so cool. And Judas, again, the title track, certainly. The rest of the album doesn't hold up to the same badassery of the title track, but it's still a good album. It's still a solid rock album. A metal album, I should say. So Fozzy, that's one. I know you're thinking, what, Chris Jericho? What the hell? No, believe me, you have no idea. Like, this is awesome metal, and they're really keeping the flame alive with metal. I don't know how well they actually do on tour, but I imagine they do all right. Anyway, so I thought that, but I love that band, and I'll listen to anything that they have come out. All right, now, my last band is one that had recently been featured on Sovereign Tech, actually. I used their song, Voice of a New Generation, to open up an episode, and this is a band that their latest album from 2017 was actually one of Eddie Trunk's, who, that's a hard guy to please, one of Eddie Trunk's picks for 2017, and the album was Bad Blood Rising. The band is Santa Cruz. Now, they have 3 albums, and they have a couple EPs too, but their main thing is their 3 albums. Screaming for Adrenaline, which came out in 2013, Santa Cruz, self-titled, which came out in 2015, and then Bad Blood Rising. Now, this is a band, they're out of Finland, okay? This is a band that I don't know if, and pay attention to how many of these bands are coming out of, like, more Eastern Europe, okay? Or Northern Europe or whatever. Their first 2 albums, I could believe, were produced, like, at home. Okay, and now I don't mean to knock them for that, because actually their 2015 album was pretty good. Their first two albums do not at all hold up to their third. Bad Blood Rising, I don't know what happened. I don't know what, maybe they started doing some kind of drugs. I don't know what happened, but that album is track for track. It is fun. There are points where it is funny, including there's a song on there, We're Going Down Like River Phoenix. But then like there's just these, real like fist pumping arena rock style metal songs on there that'll just blow your mind. And I don't know how they went from what you hear in Screaming for Adrenaline or their self-titled into the badassery and amazingness that comes up with Bad Blood Rising. There's not a bad track on that album. I mean, every single fucking song on there is amazing. Voice of a New Generation, sure, that's good, but I mean, I don't even know if that's the best track on there. And as you listen to the album more, your opinion of what the best track is constantly shifts and changes. I mean, We're Going Down Like River Phoenix is awesome. But there's every song fantastic. And there's some differing styles on there too. There's things that are almost like comedic ballads of a sort, but at the same time, some of it is like really serious and it's really heavy, and it comes out, and the lead singer, melodic. So I like that. And it just does it. And I can't wait to hear more from these guys. I think if they keep on the path that they're on, these guys could save rock and roll. I mean, I'm amazed, because especially since they definitely have some 80s metal stylings to what they're doing. Okay. But the fact that they can somehow mix in the little bit of comedy with the dead serious metal, heavy metal that they're pushing on you. I think it keeps them, they don't become Steel Panther, which Steel Panther is, I enjoy their albums, but they're by design, they're a joke. Okay. Not like Steel Panther. Somehow they walk a very fine line where they know that they're cheese, they play it up, but it's still cool, and it doesn't take away again from the pure badassery of the album. Like there's a song on there, Back from the Dead. I love it. I mean, it's really cool. And you have some very cheesy elements to it, but you feel like, you want to put on your leather jacket and, you want to go kick some ass, proverbially. It's really amazing. Santa Cruz, I am so impressed. I mean, and it's a title I probably would have given to Eclipse before I would have, if I hadn't heard Santa Cruz. But Santa Cruz just took, they just pick up the heavy metal ball and ran with it, and they can do all the different styles. And they really do incorporate it into their album. Bad Blood Rising, you want to listen to that. It is such a badass album. And a great way, really, to wrap this up and to end off the special, because we're going into over an hour. So, anyway, here it is. You Need Metal 3. These are the bands that are carrying the torch. They are the torch bearers, like Volk from Star Trek Discovery or something. These are the guys carrying the torch. They're making it happen. And guys and gals, I should say, that, and they're making it. I mean, with Fozzy, one could say, well, they're big because of Jericho. Yeah, but they're actually putting out great music now. They're not just a cover act or anything. These are people by and large, making it on their own merits. Okay. They're not relying necessarily on an actor or something like that. It's not like the Hollywood Vampires, right? Where, everybody wants to see Johnny Depp when, you have two of the greatest metal musicians of all time. You have fucking Alice Cooper and, Joe Perry, right, from Aerosmith. They're like, why aren't you impressed by them, you fucking idiots? So I mean, this is a band that, I mean, these are bands that are making it happen, that are working hard, that are trying to keep metal and even the sexiness of it and whatever other elements alive. Which I mean, look, you want the dark stuff, you want the heavy, you want your Cannibal Corpse, you want all that. Great, I don't have any problem with that. I even enjoy some of it. Okay. You want, or like Trivium, you want that really heavy stuff. Dynamite, awesome. Please, by all means, have it. But let's keep all of metal alive. You know what I mean? All the different styles, because it's such an amazing genre that it can have so many styles within itself. Okay, so let's keep supporting. I mean, like Wet has a new album coming out. I can't wait for that. Anything that Jeff Scott Soto does, I think is awesome. So you got a lot of that stuff coming out, and you got all these guys that I just listed off in the Sovereign Top 8 that are keeping it going. And let's have fun with it. And that's the nice thing, is that a lot of these bands are really having fun with what they do, and I appreciate that. Now, Again, this is totally bonus content. Okay. If you're not into heavy metal, I hope you didn't listen to it. Or if you were looking to get convinced, then maybe I hope you did listen to it. I was going to come up with a bit of an epiphany at the end of this episode. I'm going to save it. I'm going to save it for a future episode. Maybe when I have some co-hosts around and I want to talk about it, because I want to bounce it off of people. I don't want to sound so fucking nuts. So I hopefully didn't tease you too hard on that. But don't worry. You'd probably, if I told you what it was, you'd probably hate me anyway. So I'm going to get some people around me to help justify it. Anyway, there it is. You Need Metal 3. That puts an end to our You Need Metal trilogy. You definitely have a lot of bands to check out throughout the history, and hope I gave you some songs to listen to, specific albums mentioned to check out, and of course we went into some broader aspects of what metal's history in general as well. I did get a question. In fact, I'll answer it here, and I've answered it before. I think I answered it on a Patreon Q&A, but I'll end it off with this, okay? Because there's an old saying that you can tell a lot about a metalhead if depending on which godfather of metal that they like. And there's generally considered, like, there's the original trinity. Okay, you have Black Sabbath, Led Zeppelin, and Deep Purple is the one that rounds out the trinity. Depending on which one you like, it says a lot about you. I know I've talked about this before, but somebody asked me this, and so I'm glad that I'm not the only one that's heard this, kind of a mental game that you can play. And I'll answer it here. Deep Purple, all the way. I love Black Sabbath. Love Black Sabbath. Okay. Zeppelin, yeah. I love Black Sabbath. But Deep Purple, fuck yes. Fuck yes. Deep Purple is awesome. Okay. So which progenitor, forefather, godfather of metal do I appreciate the most? Definitely Deep Purple. And I don't just mean Machine Head. We could go into Burn, Stormbringer, a lot of those, and Perfect Strangers. Holy shit. One of my favorite albums, Slaves and Masters. I mean, there's so Deep Purple has such an amazing history. Even their modern stuff, is the stuff that's come out in the past couple of years. Fantastic. So anyway, there's my answer on that. Favorite metal band of all time, if people are asking that, well, there's a reason that I didn't cover any Kiss in any of this, or in general in these, but Kiss, I consider Kiss a metal band. Absolutely. I mean, they're my favorite band of all time. Like they just are, regardless of genre, like they're it. It really, it's like, it's Kiss and Michael Jackson. Oh no, Michael Jackson. Hey, you tell me a pop singer that gets Slash to play for them, and you want to tell me that they're not fucking hardcore? Kiss my ass. Yeah, MJ, he did. So, all right, that's it. We'll wrap this up here. So that puts an end to the You Need Metal trilogy. Again, I probably will never do another one of these, and I can't really picture updating it much. Because outside of bands like Santa Cruz, I don't feel, maybe H.E.A.T, I don't feel like there's a whole lot of up-and-comers out there. But I could be wrong, and if there are bands that you think I should hear based upon what you heard me talk about in this one that I didn't mention, even in passing, let me know, because I'm always looking for new great music. So there it is, just a fun little Sovryn Top 8, and of course, more of the usual content that you enjoy to come out over the next couple weeks in February, and then March, we got all kinds of hotness. I will see you on the other side.